Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of our Dungeon Boss Face-Off series. Today we are going back to one of my original list ones in terms of hero comparisons. This goes back to the roots in terms of why I wanted to start these Face-Off series, and that is taking two heroes that have the same type of a mechanic and see which one's better. I would use one versus the other. So it started off with Igorok versus Valken in terms of they both freeze. Which one should I use? Who's better? This one here is a similar aspect to that with Tsume versus Viperia. The reason that I picked these two to begin with was because they both have the interesting mechanic of purging a buff and still getting an attack on. So back before runes really ran heavy, having a well-placed Tsume attack with his Soul Shred was actually devastating because it could eat its way through a Aegis shield. And then Viperia came along, and she sort of laughed at Tsume for the longest time, saying, "Look at my snakes, they are way, way better than your stupid Soul Shred." And on top of that, Tsume was nerfed as well, and he did much, much, much less damage. We're going to ignore the nerfs at this point and consider what Tsume is now versus what he was. Many of us will believe that Tsume was awesome back in the day, and unfortunately was nerfed, which is odd because they don't really nerf anybody now. They just leave people as OP. And it's kind of sad that if Tsume would have been around later in the game and not an early hero, he probably would have kept his same base like a Savage Fury to start with and would have been much, much more devastating. Unfortunately, those times 2, times 3, times 3.5 multipliers with the rune loadouts now would be absolutely astronomical. So any of you that have those really high attacks from Shade, for example, think of having some really high attacks to start with and then also getting a times 3 modifier on it, and we're looking at some crazy, crazy numbers. I personally would have liked to see it, but this was back before runes when they nerfed him. It's unfortunate, but that's how it is. So they changed him as part of a demon event that they did, and overall the demons got better, but he got worse. It's unfortunate. That being said, let's go ahead and take a look at these two together here and see what we're looking at. So we're going to start out with those base stats like we always do. And remember, we're looking at just the base. The fact that they are epic or not epic is irrelevant. The numbers we saw remain static for the most part, and so we are easily able to compare them. Attack on Tsume. He's got 1872 base plus a 16% passive. That passive is always going to be there because it is his passive. It is not in epic, so that does count in here. Technically, it's only 15%, but based on his skill, grows up a little bit, gives us an extra 1% there. It's probably really only 15.51. It's probably just rounded up to 16. But, so let's just say 1872 plus 15%. We have to keep that in mind. And looking at Viperia. Nice, we don't have to scroll too far this time. Base attack on Viperia. She has 2125. So it's a little bit close to count here. Let's take 1872 and find out what that extra 15% is. Brings Tsume up to 2152. So with the full 15% bonus, 2152 versus 2125, Tsume gets the nod. So because that passive trait is always there, a fully leveled up and starred Tsume is always going to have a higher base attack than Viperia. Point towards Tsume. Defense. Base of 1755, no passive buffs for her. And then Tsume has a base of 1480. He also gets an epic. Epic is going to max out at 30%, so let's do some comparison here. 1755 from Viperia. We have 1480 here. Defense is his highest epic. 30% total is what's going to come out here. So in terms of all things maxed out as best as possible, let's consider that there. And we will say, so it is 1480 plus 30%. which is 1924, which is actually significantly better defense than Viperia. So defense-wise, Tsume also has the lead there. That is, however, considering his epic. So without epics, Viperia technically does win. For the sake of argument in this one here, we're going to assume a max epic Tsume. We're assuming that you're going to be having your heroes as best as possible when you want to compare them. If you didn't have the heroes as best as possible, it would make more sense that you would use the one that's better at the time, whether it's more stars or more ascensions and so on. So in this case here, we're going to consider that epic. Skill, 1332. That is quite on the low side as far as skills go. It's not the lowest by any means, but it is pretty low for a fully ascended 6-star hero. 1332 is not going to get him a lead in too many spots, as well as a priority, really. Skill on Viperia, 1776, no buff there. Clearly a quite an increase from Tsume, so that is a point towards Viperia. So it is currently 2-1 Tsume. Viperia only has skill right now. Attack and defense are both heavily favored towards Tsume, which is a big deal. Those are the two primary stats. Max health, 5795, plus she gets a plus 20% due to scaly skin, which was, where is it? My god. Why do I not see this? Oh, there it is. Increase HP for all reptile allies. So it was the first one that I clicked. Scaly Clan 2, so she gets that regardless. It is not an epic, it is just there. But we're going to get, it's a base 20%, I'm guessing, and then 22% because of skill. So she is going to have 5700 plus 22%. And let's check out Tsume. Tsume has max health 5552, plus he's got epic. He's going to get a max epic of 20%. So they both get basically a 20% increase because Viperia has a higher base one. Her health is always going to be higher than Tsume's. They're mostly negligible for the most part. We're looking at a difference of only about 200 health points. So it's not a huge issue, but technically a point towards Viperia. So if you consider attack and defense on the same equal playing field as skill and health, we're technically looking at a 2-2 tie right now. I don't personally see that. I see a 2-2 tie, but tie goes to Tsume, in my opinion. But let's start looking at some of their damage. So let's look at their abilities. Soul Shred. It does not explicitly say it, and this is sort of an not really a hidden secret or anything like that, but Soul Shred actually does hit twice. So it hits once and purges, and then it hits again. So if you've ever wondered why it hit through some of those Aegis shields, it's because it doesn't pierce it itself, it just hits twice. So it technically does 795, and it's going to do that times 2, and it is also an AoE. So technically speaking, we're looking at roughly 1600 damage to unshielded opponents, basically. So for an AoE, it's certainly nothing, super impressive, but it's a pretty good attack. You get that Savage Fury on there, and it's certainly something to behold. Viperia, on the other hand, and I'll be honest, I knew Viperia purges stuff, and I know the snakes would purge a shield, for example, and then hit again. What I did not know, and it's not that I didn't know, it's just that I did not know completely, because I never really read the tooltips that much. It says flat out here that Snakes on the Plane actually hits 3 times. I did not know that. I thought it was always just a double attack, which is part of what makes this attack so devastating, is because it hits 3 times. So 3 times at 1200 each. Any way you spin it, this is doing more damage than Tsume does. It hits an extra turn, or an extra round, and it does basically almost twice as much damage per hit. So it's a big attack. I've seen Viperias with Drenched do tons of damage because it hits 3 times. She is something. Definitely something to fear with this attack here. Next attack, Death Bites, sort of underwhelming. It has a cool little proc though that grants her invincibility. I don't see it happening too often other than in PvE dungeons, although who's running reptiles in PvE dungeons these days? Probably not a lot of people, because there's better beast teams and undead teams and really just any other team. Reptile team isn't really a staple for running PvE dungeons, at least not as of yet. Perhaps in some of the boss modes we'll have some things that say can only be killed by reptiles, or reptiles deal 10 times damage, whatever it might be. We might see them used more often in the future. But so this is an AoE attack, does 1275. So basically 1275 times 3 of them. I found it interesting. It also does 1275 on this one as well. So they have actually the exact same power. It's just one does not have any well, one, it doesn't hit 3 times, for one. So technically, Snakes on the Plane is 3 times as higher. But has the same base attack to start with. But 1275, and it's going to hit AoE, so it's technically times 3. Versus damage output on Tsume. He does a single target, double chop, 1357 twice. So 1275 times 3 people is going to be 3700-ish. Take this one 2 times, and we're technically looking at advantage Viperia there. In terms of total damage output, we're looking at 2600 versus 3700. It's pretty clear cut in that front. Last attack is Spreading Panic. 2 random plus the first one, so we're looking at roughly 3000, probably about 3100 damage. As far as kind of a single target, it could be, but basically 3000 total damage output. Versus a highly specialized one with Viperia. Viperia alone, this skill is going to be incredibly underwhelming. The reptile pile only does 1700, so at base it does that one hit more than what Tsume does. However, if there's no other reptiles on the team, this skill is all but useless. So I'll take 3 hits of 1000 each with Tsume, plus he has the possibility to fear. If he fears on the first one and you're going against a single target, Tsume will dominate that person, and that's used to be how you would win PvP sometimes, is that third attack of his is brutal. So let's look at the basic attacks. Basic attack of 1052 versus Tsume has a basic attack of 936. Looking at the overall numbers, this is roughly, again, like a lot of the other ones, basically their primary attack is 50% of their base attack. We already looked at the attack before. Because of the passive, not an epic, but the passive that Tsume has, his base attack was higher than Viperia, and that makes him deal more damage for every basic attack. So no matter what, he will always deal more damage, with the exception of maybe Venom, but Venom is a very specific proc. It's more likely that Tsume is going to have taken damage and Savage Fury will kick in and do more damage, and it certainly scales faster than what Venom does. Venom grows rather slowly, does not add a ton of extra damage. So where does that leave us in terms of comparison? Believe it or not, this one here is a little bit too close to call so far. This is one of the first ones where I'm going to be hesitant to make a judgment, because both of these heroes have some things going for them. Viperia can be shielded very, very easily by being paired with one of her sisters. One sister or the other reptiles, they die, she gets more powerful. Tsume takes damage, he gets more power. They both have very specific things that make them very useful. Viperia is a pretty common meta hero as far as PvP goes. Tsume is not really meta in PvP or PvE, so that's another point towards Viperia there. Viperia plays really, really well in terms of team play as far as reptiles go, and even nature heroes in general. Tsume plays well with certain nature heroes like Willow or Bulbous, but is not really a team-oriented player. Even if you use him on a demon team, the demon team is really only viable in PvP right now, which is kind of surprising because nobody uses the demons in PvP. If the stuff that we got from the Demon team was a PvE, we might see Tsume on some sort of an auto run team there. But overall, I think Tsume has the better overall stats. He deals more damage, he's stronger and tougher. Their health is largely the same, but Viperia is much more heavily used. She has a couple of better procs. They really balance out very close to each other. So in terms of numbers, I am going to call it and say that Tsume is the better hero. I don't think there's much we can dispute about that. He has points in his favor in all the areas where it counts. He does more damage. He's got better defense. Their health is largely the same. He's got a better basic attack. And then his skills are likely better as well. Viperia's main thing is her shield, her team synergy, and her snakes on the plane is a devastating attack. Otherwise, skill and health bonuses are just not quite there. So I know this is going to be a controversial one. People are probably going to say that Viperia is hands down way better than Tsume. I don't know that I necessarily believe that, but I would probably agree with that in some cases. I'll use Viperia much more than Tsume. Not even a question. I use her at least a few times a week. Tsume I haven't touched in months, even with his epic. I did a quick review on it, and it's underwhelming to me. But from a number standpoint, I think we're going to give it to Tsume for now. But if you have any things that I overlooked in terms of why one's better or worse than the other, feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, any other questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave them below, and we will start a conversation. Otherwise, until next time, we will see you again, and thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you like this video, please show your continued support by hitting that like button, and be sure to check out both my YouTube channels for new content all the time. And always remember, peace is a lie, there's only passion. We'll see you next time.